Welcome. My name is Rob van Tulder and I will be hosting the first 2 days of this conference. It is quite a technical operation, so I'm slightly nervous, but with my team and the professional support of the ScienceWorks platform and the technical staff, we hope to run a smooth conference. Welcome, therefore, to the virtual campus of the Rotterdam School of Management at Erasmus University. This conference is organized by the Partnerships Resource Center in collaboration with the Garrison Institute. We are in the middle of a global health crisis, an imminent climate crisis, and a slowly aggravating inequality crisis. We all have said it many times over the past year, but it's still not a cliche. We are living in challenging times, which didn't start with the corona crisis and will not end with everyone getting vaccinated. Antidote to the doom and gloom image of the past 5 years have been the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. That was a clear paradigm bridge with the past, in which development was considered to be a responsibility of governments primarily. The SDGs attracted the attention of almost all major companies in the world, for instance, as a major investment opportunity. But to quote Secretary General of the UN, Guterres, we are off track. Last week's unedited version of the progress report on the SDGs of the Secretary General contains the following quote, for instance: "The pandemic has already had a very significant impact in a number of areas, undermining decades of development efforts." And the Secretary General states, "A concerted effort is needed." So let's talk about the role of corporate leadership in particular. Why do companies embrace the SDGs but face difficulties in walking the talk? How to step up the pace and make use of the transformational potential of the SDGs and seize the innovative and scaling potentials of companies? How to make sure that companies don't abuse their powers? In short, what is needed to create a decade of action, and what should be the role of business schools? Moreover, why Rotterdam School of Management? Our Dean Ansgar Richter explains in the next clip.
Hello, welcome to the Driving Systems Change Corporate Leadership for the SDGs conference organized by the Partnerships Resource Center here at Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University. While we wish we could have welcomed you to our wonderful campus for this event, we're nevertheless excited to have you join us virtually for the coming days. The mission of our school is to be a force of positive change in the world. The United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals have been used to bring our mission to life across RSM by providing a real-life framework for our students, faculty, and staff to think about the future they want for themselves and for global society. We aim to show how business education and management knowledge can be used to provide meaningful solutions to the world's biggest problems and ultimately create a more sustainable future for us all. So it is our hope that our students will be the leaders of the future, who are not only prepared to address the systemic SDG issues, but who also will be capable of helping companies understand how they themselves can contribute more to solving these global problems. This conference signals the importance that we at RSM attach to the SDGs for ourselves and for corporate leadership. We engage daily in thoughtful research around these issues and are committed to partnering and co-creating a future with you from the insights we generate. During this event, you will have the opportunity to learn more about our renowned online MOOC course, Driving Business Towards the SDGs, and our SDG cases, to also access publications like our Principles of Sustainable Business book and experience our Better Business Scan. You will also have the chance over the next 3 days to hear from an amazing array of speakers, many of whom are leading the global charge for change. A sincere thank you to all of our speakers for joining our program and for inspiring us to do more and be better. special thank you to our keynote speakers, Peter Bakker, Jeffrey Sachs, Madam Mosing, Paul Pullman, Kailash Satyarthi, Esko Aho, and Robert Metzger. A thank you also to the directors and staff of RSM Partnership Resource Center for organizing the conference. I wish you a very productive, inspiring, and engaging event, and challenge you to think about how you will use what you learn from this conference to be an even greater force for positive change in this world. Stay safe and healthy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ansgar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first 3-day conference that RSM organizes around a theme that business scholars would normally call grand challenges. Until now, more than 1,000 people have registered for the conference from more than 74 countries. So we are happy to welcome you all in the coming days. This 3-day conference has 2 major aims. First, we want to inform you. Second, to inspire you. We will launch at least 10 different initiatives that are aimed at stepping up the pace of corporate involvement in the SDGs. We hope also that this is the start of a greater collaboration between the corporate sector and business schools around the world. This is also the reason why we have such a packed program and invited so many stakeholders as active participants. So we consider this a start, not an end in itself. Each conference day has a leading theme. The first day, the strategic challenge, the second day, the operational challenge, and the third day, the leadership challenge. They're all interconnected. And each day will also be organized around 4 tracks. Keynotes, where we have invited thought-provoking speeches and conversations around these major themes with leading actors in the field. Panels that discuss in a more interactive manner the themes of the day, which will also be moderated by me, and we will also try to get some of your questions involved, and I will try to moderate that through the panelists. Then every day also there will be 3 breakout sessions, parallel sessions, so you might not be able to participate in them all, in which an even bigger number of specialists, involved experts and the like will then discuss some of the major initiatives that we are going to launch during this conference. And then in the end, there's an expo room. The expo room will contain so-called expo booths, in which many of the initiatives are supported, represented, and from time to time even the authors, the initiators, the leaders of those projects will be present. You can visit the booth 24 hours a day during the conference, but maybe between 6:30 and 5:30 and 6:30, many of those booths will actually be filled by the initiators themselves. Okay, let's, without further ado, go to today's keynotes. I'm really happy also to present the 2 key speakers of today. On the one hand, we have Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs is a professor at Columbia University, but more important, perhaps, he also been the chief advisor of the Secretary General of the UN, also during the creation of the SDGs. He's at the moment the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, but also the president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which creates all sorts of interesting reports. Our second keynote will be Peter Bakker. He's the former CEO of TNT, which, by the way, founded one of the earliest global alliances between TNT and the World Food Programme in pooling together the efforts of the World Food Programme and a major company. But at the moment, of course, which we also is the reason why we invited him, he's the president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Just a technical detail, Professor Sachs will have to leave at 3:30, which also means that we give him the floor for his keynote presentation on the theme of today. Then leave a little bit room also for maybe some questions. After that, he has to leave. And in the meantime, Peter Bakker has joined us also and gives his speech And then at exactly 3:45, we will switch sides. Then we will go to the panel, and Peter will join us in the panel. So in that sense also, he will stay for a longer period of time. So can I invite Professor Jeffrey Sachs to the fore? I don't see you yet, but I hope you are there. I get the message that there's a technical issue in the backstage where Jeffrey Sachs is there, but has to plug into this general conference session. Maybe tell you something about Professor Sachs. We started the Business Society Management Department 20 years ago, and at that time already our students that participate in that master, as we would call it now, read a lot of literature. And one of the basic books that we read, and it was 2005, was the book of Jeffrey Sachs, The End of Poverty, which is clearly at that stage also a statement that poverty is not sort of a moral issue only. Of course it is, but it's also a pragmatic issue. It can be solved if we take the right approach to this. That was, of course, in the time that the Millennium Development Goals were still very active. They were started in 2000. And then after 2005 until 2015, one of the major achievements of the Millennium Development Goals has been that poverty has been reduced by half. Now, of course, then that stimulated also the Sustainable Development Goals to be formulated and then implemented in 2015. That then has the ambition to not only halve poverty, but eradicate poverty in all its forms by the year 2030. That has been the ambition, and it has been an achievable ambition. However, then came in Corona, of course. And so we are running off track a bit, as the Secretary General already has stated. But we also see that a major problem has been not just Corona, but that, and you can find that also in the background material, that many companies have embraced the SDGs, but find it difficult also to link it to the business case. Also find it difficult to implement it in their daily routines, and then seize the full opportunity of what many research have shown is a $12 trillion investment opportunity. So this is one of the reasons why we have invited Peter Bakker, but also Jeffrey Sachs, to from their perspective also to refer to what they have found. And both will probably also reiterate the fact that it's not necessarily an ideological or a political issue, but that it is a really important part of just getting this at the level of strategic management of corporations achieved. I see now that Jeffrey Sachs is here. I don't see him yet, so maybe the technical support can help me. To show him in. I see Peter Bakker. Hi, Peter.
Okay.
I see Jeffrey.
Hi,
so we're
hi.
all together now. So I hope you followed a little bit my very sort of positive introduction of you, Jeffrey.
Well, unfortunately, I missed it. So, but thank you. I just got in the room.
But I also informed the audience that you have to leave at 3:30. But let's hope that we might tweak you a little bit. But I give you the floor on this big issue of systemic change and the role of corporations. So please take the floor, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. Apologies for jumping in late, but I was struggling with passwords, links, audio permissions, and all the rest on this system. So greetings to everybody. I think the right starting point is to understand what is our challenge. Why did the world adopt Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement? And where do we stand on this, especially in the context of the pandemic? We adopted sustainable development as the organizing principle for global cooperation and diplomacy because the economy as it functions doesn't produce what we need and want. The world economy has been rather reliable at producing wealth, but not very good at sharing the wealth equitably and inclusively, or at producing the wealth in an environmentally sustainable manner. The essence of sustainable development is its holistic vision of a society that is prosperous, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable, not just a society that is wealthy. The United States is wealthy, but it is tearing itself apart through social exclusion, mass inequality, and environmental crisis, just as an example. So we need to update The Wealth of Nations, which was written by Adam Smith in 1776, to the well-being of nations. That's the 21st century idea, and that requires that holistic approach of sustainable development. At a global scale, we have two profound challenges at the global scale. One is that we are endangering the biosphere in fundamental ways, as everybody knows. I won't belabor the climate risk, the biodiversity collapse, the massive pollution, and the zoonotic disease events that are enveloping us today with COVID-19, but which are coming frequently in the 21st century with SARS and MERS and SARS-CoV-2 and other emerging diseases. So we have four massive environmental crises that need to be addressed. And we have a large part of the world that absolutely is falling farther and farther behind. And I hear reports every day by so-called middle-income countries that basically are seeing the social fabric ripped apart right now because they are not getting the immunizations. They are in the midst of this pandemic. There is already a grievous inequality of income. Children are not the kind of education, and that's middle-income countries. And then when you think about the poorest countries, we have hundreds of millions of kids not in school. We have hundreds of millions of people without electricity. We have hundreds of millions of people without access to healthcare, and we pretend once in a while that we're a civilized world. And this is not civilization. This is indecency. So the Sustainable Development Goals aims to move the world in a different direction. Now, what does it mean? It means we have to invest massively in a different way. The European Green Deal is prototypical and paradigmatic, I should say, of what needs to be done. We need to decarbonize the energy system. This is obvious. We need to create circular economy to pick up after our wastes and stop the massive pollution. We need the Farm to Fork program for sustainable diets, food supplies, and land use. We need a digital economy which reaches everybody, not just half the world on internet, but all of it. Because now with half the world online, half the world is able to get basic services, work from home, stay in jobs, have their kids educated, and half the world's off the radar screen, literally, and not able to be part of our global processes. So it's an investment program that is needed. And businesses are the key investors in this. They're the key suppliers of goods and services. They are the builders of the physical infrastructure, even if government is financing it. It's businesses that are building the digital economy, that are building the renewable energy systems, and so forth. So what do businesses have to do? Well, most importantly, businesses have to align with these objectives. And in the United States, where we live in a corrupt oligarchy, We need to get businesses out of the lobbying back rooms of Congress and into the forefront of building the kind of economy we want. In the US, the businesses are interested in one thing only, and that is not paying taxes and their bottom line. The environment be damned, the society be damned. We have a horrible corporate leadership, which is working overtime right now to prevent even a modest rise of corporate taxes after an incredible, unaffordable slashing of corporate taxes under our psychopathic former President Trump. But the business sector isn't socially oriented at all. They just want to make money in the short term. That's our problem. And the world's problem is we need global cooperation to put this basic investment agenda into operation. So it's a big lift, and I'm just coming off of discussions about U.S. politics right now. Situation's a mess. Greed, racial hatred, it probably these are the dominant factors in America right now. We have a very good and decent president and a very divided country and a very poor corporate leadership, which is filled with irresponsibility. We have ExxonMobil fighting its battle today to try to keep off the board investors who are calling for ExxonMobil to align with the 2050 decarbonization goals, because ExxonMobil thinks it can just brazen its way through as a fossil fuel producer forever. This is what we're really facing. I believe that companies, good companies, decent companies, should be examining 4 issues of their own behavior. First is their product lines. If you're producing coal, oil, or gas, you're in the wrong business. If you're producing unhealthy foods, you're in the wrong business. If you're producing addictive products, you're in the wrong business. So the first is the product line, because we need goods and services that are truly good for people. And a lot of what is produced is not good for people. It's destructive of the environment or destructive of lives, though it can give a big fat bottom line. The second thing companies need to do is ask about their own production processes. Are they themselves sustainable in terms of environmental impacts and social impacts? Are they operating in communities in a just way? Are they paying workers in a decent way? Is their environmental production sustainable, and so on? The third question I think businesses should ask is about their global supply chains, which is that upstream and downstream, are they part of a sustainable and just system? You know, if you're procuring products from Amazon deforestation, that's not good. If you're procuring products from child labor or slave labor or bonded labor supply chains, that's not good. Responsibilities don't stop at the corporate boundary. They include the co-responsibility of the entire supply chain. And the fourth question is citizenship of the company. We say that businesses are legal persons. Well, persons have ethical responsibilities. And one of those in our society is the license to operate. And for that, the question for me is, are companies paying taxes fairly, for example? I would like the Netherlands also not to be a tax haven. This would be a big help because the Netherlands has been a major conduit of tax evasion over decades now, and a major way of tax avoidance. So good citizenship means good governance by government and politics, and it also means responsibility by companies. So this is the bottom line for me, Rob, which is that sustainable development is nothing less than the future we really need. It is holistic. It is about social justice and environmental sustainability. And companies need to align in these 4 ways with what they produce, how they produce it, the supply chains that they're in, and their corporate citizenship. And this is our battle. It's really a battle. I'm living in a country that struggles to understand any of these concepts right now because for America, the bottom line was money beginning to end, and we're still struggling to find the social values. But if we don't find that, we're not going to have a viable world.
Thank you, thanks, Jeff. It seems as if it is a moral statement that you make, and maybe direct a number of the questions that many people would have also a statement like this. Because there are lots of companies, also American companies, that subscribe to the SDGs. So in a sense, the intention is there, but the tension is there as well in terms of what you just figured. So the 4 lines, I don't think any also business scholar would disagree with that companies should have a moral obligation there. But now the question is, you subscribe to the SDGs, you're faced with these tensions. So how credible is then the call it the support of big companies, say American companies, for the SDGs? ExxonMobil, I think, also subscribes to the SDGs, just to give an example. So what is your take on this?
Of course, we have to look at actual behavior. Today will be interesting. Will BlackRock vote its shares in ExxonMobil for the proposal for decarbonization, or will it vote along with management? This is a crucial question for American capitalism, because Larry Fink has been saying for years now that we need a multi-stakeholder capitalism.
Exactly.
And we'll see how he votes today, because this is a real showdown. I know the Exxon leadership, they don't get it. This is a bad company, in my view, bad behavior. And they're being taken to task today at the shareholders meeting. But how it comes out is going to be a real answer to the question you're asking. What we find, and it's amazing, of course, it took the Business Roundtable in the United States decades to move past the Friedman shareholder-only idea. You know, Dutch company law, Netherlands company law is much more sophisticated and humane. You are the land of Erasmus, after all. We are the land of John Locke, which is quite different, by the way, which is not about humanism, but is about protection of private property. This is, and so, but every year when we review the actual balance sheets of Wall Street, they've been still investing up until today in coal projects, oil and gas projects, as if climate change didn't exist. So there's been some movement in words, but not in deed. And now President Biden has proposed an infrastructure program, including for decarbonization. And the companies are jumping up and down because he's asking them, or he's not asking them, he's calling for half of the tax cut of 2017, none of which was affordable. But he wants to, we had a statutory corporate tax rate of 35%. Trump took it down to 21%. Biden's saying, let's bring it back up to 28%. So it leaves half of this unaffordable tax cut. But the companies are saying not 1 penny more in an era of unprecedented inequality of income and wealth in the United States. It's a funny country. By the way, we will not survive this if we can't figure out that there's a common good.
Maybe one final question, because I know you have to leave, Jeffrey, so I respect that also. This is a continued conversation that we will have in the next couple of years.
And thank you, by the way, for all the leadership, because you're giving tools to companies to actually do this, which is really crucial.
We really hope so, and we also hope that ExxonMobil and the Roundtable of Business, say in the US, will not only have the words, but also have the tools to implement it. But final words on this. Can we do without the American sort of laggards in a global system where we face the SDGs and all the systemic crises? Maybe a short answer to this, because should we ignore then the culprits in the US that you just so vividly described, or should we, what should we do?
Really, Europe is a kind of swing vote right now. The US is, in its still libertarian mania, even with the president that we have. China is being challenged as the evil other, and the United States is saying to Europe, you back us so that we can stay on top. Well, this is not the right role of Europe. Europe's role is to lead sustainable development, and that's what the European Green Deal is about, and that's what all of the stakeholder capitalism approach is about in Europe. So what I would suggest is that European leaders, both business leaders and political leaders, say to the United States, no, we don't follow you. You get on the case. We want multilateralism, rule of law, and sustainable development. It would be a kind of wake-up call to the US, which expects others to follow, but it's time for American responsibility. I think it's feasible. It's just not what they're used to.
Okay. Jeffrey, let's finish here, because I think what you just described is a sort of, call it an assignment also to Europe, but also to European business schools. And I really take that also as something that I feel very strong about. You know that, of course. So let's see whether we can work together on this, but not now. You have to leave. But maybe we invite Peter Bakker now to the fore, and you can leave then, and he will then sort of enter his view on, maybe he's a little bit less gloomy than you will. By the way, we will tape all these presentations, so you might be able then to see it back.
Well, wonderful, and you're in good hands with Peter, who's a great leader on all of these issues. So Peter's upbeat because he's making change. But Peter, it's a tough battle in the United States. We need you.
I can tell, Jeff. I can tell.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and see you next time. Peter, I introduced you already. I think you heard what I said. I said you are also the CEO of TNT, striking the first global alliance with the World Food Programme. And from there on, you just went to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development with great plans also in 2050 agenda, thinking about regenerative mindsets and the like, which I think it's a vital also approach that business schools can take over. So please, I take the floor for your keynote.
Thank you very much, Rob. And it's always great to talk after Jeff, because the older he gets, the more radical his views become, and that's good. Maybe just to follow up, I don't believe that it's true that all the bad people in the world go into business, by the way, which Jeff seemed to suggest. The news just broke while Jeff was talking that Shell has lost the court case in the Netherlands and will now be legally forced to accelerate the decarbonization. So from that point of view, the first swing vote from Europe has been one that is going to ring loud and clear across the oil and gas space. So indeed, I'm Peter. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We bring together 200 leading companies from around the world to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable world. And we have launched not too long ago, I think about a month ago or so now, a piece of work which is called Vision 2050. If you go to timetotransform.biz, then you can find all the materials, download them to your leisure, and read where the world needs to go and what in particular the role of business in all of this is. The analysis is quite simple, and Jeff was right. There are three global challenges out there. One is the climate emergency. It is no longer climate change that we're talking about, it is climate emergency. The second is the loss of nature, and the third is the growing inequality. Each of these three big global challenges will endanger the safe operating space for humanity. And this is easily said, and I don't know how many people will be on the line today, but listen to what I say. This is endangering the safe operating space for humanity. And it will certainly endanger the reputation and the license to operate, as Jeff was saying on the businesses around there. COVID has only accelerated all of this. It has amplified the severity. It has shown us how ill-prepared we are for major global shocks like the pandemic has brought to our systems. Many supply chains in the world are still not back up and running. And it has really shown us the interconnection between the environment, between health, between economic success, or in this case, failure. So what we need is a common vision, a vision that we can all work towards. And the proposal that we've put on the table is that in 2050, when we have more than 9 billion people on planet Earth, we want them all to live well within the boundaries of the planet. And this all living well within the boundaries of the planet has, in this vision document, and for those of you who download it, you'll see it there, has been scientifically defined on what that is. So in order to move from these 3 big global challenges to this world where 9+ billion people can live well within the boundary of the planet, we need radical system transformation. In very simple terms, everything has to change, and we have to make big steps forward in the coming 10 years. This is not an agenda for 2050. This is the decade of action we are in now. And system transformation has been defined. Everybody talks about system transformation. Not too many people really understand what it is. And again, in this long document, you'll find a good piece of work on how to think about system transformation, and particularly, again, what the role of business is. I think Jeffrey got it absolutely right when he said that the first thing that businesses need to think about and challenge for themselves is the products they bring to market. So when we think about the system transformation that the world needs, we in Vision 2050 have broken that down in what we call 9 pathways. And each pathway is a different product or service that business produces for society. So you'll find an energy pathway, transport and mobility pathway, financial services pathway, a food pathway, and 5 more. And for each of these pathways, we have defined a vision in itself. So clean, renewable energy, affordable for all is a vision for the energy system. We've defined what are the key transitions we need to then have inside the energy products. And we have defined what are the actions, the solutions that business must implement between now and 2030. So we break down this big global vision of 9 billion people living well within the boundaries of the planet into 9 product pathways, and each of them get 10 actions that businesses should implement. So very actionable. And my role now is I speak to 3-4 boards of large companies each week to tell them what the 10 actions are that they should be implementing now. So what it basically says is sustainability has moved away from giving back, philanthropy, or CSR, the corporate social responsibility. It's now deeply embedded in the corporate strategy. And this is transformational change. Let me give you one example. Car companies producing lots of vehicles with combustion engines, they know and they realize that no later than 2030, 2032, the world will no longer accept combustion engines as new vehicles. We need to electrify. We need to get to zero steel. We need to build these cars in zero energy factories. We need to fuel them with renewable energy. A massive change to the mobility system that we have now, and that all will play out in the coming decade. So this is an agenda of system change, of real opportunities for innovation that are out there. The risk in this story, however, is that you could think that this is just an engineering problem. There is climate change. We have to be decarbonizing. Let's bring the engineers in and work out what a battery solution for a vehicle could be. That's part of the solution, and that's absolutely a contribution that business needs to make. But we must also change the way we think in business. And that is what we have called the mindset shifts. There are 3 mindset shifts that are critical. The first one, we need to reinvent capitalism. I'll talk about it in a few words. We need to move to regenerative business models. We cannot just take from the planet. We need to make sure that the planet can restore itself. And thirdly, we need to make sure that our systems are resilient. Because even if we put our very best efforts in, further shocks like the pandemic will occur. Climate change will cause trouble and havoc. Biodiversity loss will do the same. And social unrest will no doubt continue to be on the rise. Let me say a few words about reinventing capitalism. This is not an ideological debate whether capitalism is the right or the wrong answer to our issues. But we need to tweak capitalism. We need to focus on the longer term. We need to internalize the externalities, i.e. we need to integrate the environmental and the social costs that business produces. And we need to hold boards accountable. The role of CEOs, the responsibility of corporate boards will change, will integrate environmental and social footprint of their companies, and only then will we get a capitalism that delivers true value. It's obvious from everything I say that business has a leading role to play in delivering the SDGs, in driving these transformations, but it cannot do it alone. It must work together with governments, with innovators, entrepreneurs, and even with the consumers in the choices that people make. So a massive agenda. I'm really happy that RSM this week is organizing this amazing program that is in front of you. I've seen that there's some really, really interesting new things. A book and website launch on the principles of sustainable business is being launched this week. Platform for enhancing the SDG Nexus challenge is coming out. A partnership resource center is there, Better Business Scan. And what I find the most interesting one, and I really want to learn a lot about, Rob, is the wage indicator foundation on living wage. Because when we talk about inequality, we don't need academics to tell us what we need to do. We need to pay everybody in all supply chains on the world a living income. That will solve inequality faster than anything else. I'll leave it at that. It's time to transform, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yes, we are indeed in a vital moment of this conference where I don't know exactly how we're going to manage this in the correct way. We're moving from the keynote presentation to the panel. But before, maybe one question on this, Peter, before we leave it then also to the panel. You will participate in the panel anyway. But yeah, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is not a European initiative, although there are heavy influences. How do you cope with what Jeff just said? He also said something about the US, but also about China. But you organize all these different organizations. How to deal with that? Maybe even on a personal leadership point of view. Is it easy? Should we be critical about this? Should we be skeptical about, or are you still optimistic about this?
I love Jeff to bits, but I think Jeff has been traumatized by 4 years of Trump.
Yeah.
And that is really weighing heavily on him, understandably, by the way, because those were not pretty years. We work with 200 global companies. 45 of those are headquartered in the USA. I'm on the advisory board of 2 US-based companies, talking to the boards and the CEOs almost on a weekly basis. These people all understand perfectly well that their supply chains for the vast majority run into many countries outside of the USA, that more than half of their revenues are outside of the USA, so they have to be part of the global conversation. And sure, in the US, I'm sure some of them will argue against tax increases because that's what the public affairs departments will do.
Yeah.
But it's not true that they are not taking part in the global conversation anymore.
Okay, that is a very good take for the next round, where we involve the panel with a board member of DSM, a former prime minister, and one of our deans of the executive program.